In this episode, we talk about Mpox, the disease that has once again been declared a global emergency by the World Health Organization. We also talk about Pakistan violating the ceasefire agreement on the LOC. But first, we talk about India's concern over the situation in Gaza. Hi, I am Niharika Nanda, and you are listening to Three Things, the Indian Express news show. On 9th September, External Affairs Minister S. Shankar was at the first India GCC Ministerial Meeting for Strategic Dialogue in Riyadh. The Gulf Cooperation Council, or the GCC, is an alliance for improving political and economic integration. The council includes 6 Arab countries: Bahrain, Kuwait, Oman, Qatar, Saudi Arabia, and United Arab Emirates. A major point of discussion during the meeting was the ongoing war between Israel and Hamas. S. Shankar told ministers from the GCC that the current situation in Gaza is of foremost concern. Post the meeting, the foreign ministers of the nations adopted a joint action plan 2024-2028. To learn more about the ministerial meeting, what all was discussed regarding the Israel and Hamas war, and what is the newly adopted joint action plan, we have Indian Express's Diplomatic Affairs editor Shubhajit Roy joining us. Shubhajit, Minister S. Shankar said that the situation in Gaza is of foremost concern right now at the India GCC Ministerial Meeting. So, can you tell us why is this statement particularly significant?
I think the setting and the context makes it significant because he was in Riyadh, Saudi Arabia, to address and attend the India GCC Foreign Ministers Meeting. So GCC is this Gulf Cooperation Council of 6 countries from the Gulf region. And the foreign ministers of those countries were present there. And External Affairs Minister S. Shankar was addressing these foreign ministers. In that context, he spoke about the situation in Gaza, where he essentially said that he was deeply pained by the death of innocent civilians and that the situation in Gaza is foremost concern, and also asked that everyone must abide by the international humanitarian law. So that was sort of an oblique reference to Israel's military actions, military offensive in Gaza, and in which so far an estimated 40,000 people have died.
Right, and to give our audience a little bit of a background, can you tell us what is the current situation in Gaza?
Yeah, so the fighting has been on now for 11 months after 7th of October last year, when Hamas made a surprise attack on Israeli soil and killed at least about 1,200 people. And they took about 250 people as hostages, most of them Israeli nationals, some foreign nationals as well, and some dual nationals, of course. And so far, 150 have been released or have died in custody or in the battle or have been killed in custody as well. And in fact, last week, I think about 6 of the hostages, the Israeli hostages, were killed by Hamas when the ground operations were closing in on their hideout where Hamas had kept them for the last 11 months. After that, there have been a lot of protests in Israel about releasing of the hostages. But on the ground, while sort of casualty has been so high, about 40,000 estimated people in Gaza have died or have been killed with bombardments or firing by the Israeli military. But there has been also talks for a ceasefire for the last several months, which have not really led to a solution. There are proposals of different kinds, but it seems that there has been no progress towards ceasefire so far. So the situation is really dire. The situation in Gaza, as we understand, there have been reports of a polio epidemic spreading. There are crises of food, water, medicines. So international community is trying to send aid. So that is the kind of dire situation.
Right. And ever since the war began on 7th October 2023, what stance has been adopted by India regarding the conflict?
Right. So just after 7th of October, in fact, within hours of the attack, Prime Minister Narendra Modi had expressed his concern at the terrorist attack by Hamas. He had expressed concern at terrorism. And he had also had a conversation with Benjamin Netanyahu at that point of time. So in which Indian government was seen to be squarely backing Israel at that point of time. But soon after, India nuanced its position and started talking about the situation in Palestine, the plight of the civilians in Palestine, plight of the people of Palestine, and about the two-state solution. And over the last, say, 6-8 months, it has further been nuanced to express more concern at the situation in Gaza. As I said earlier, that, so far about 40,000 people have died. The international community also has shifted its position from a blanket support to Israel to now a much more nuanced, a position taken by many Western countries, including the United States of America. And that's why we see so much of so many statements coming out from India in the last few weeks, few months, talking about the situation in Gaza.
And talking about these statements, there was this particular combined statement that the BRICS nations came out with. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, that was a very strong statement. I think that is the most strong and sharply worded formulation on the situation in Gaza that was framed at the BRICS foreign ministers meeting. But it happened on the 10th of June this year, just when Indian government has been re-elected, and it had been sworn in on the 9th of June. And a day after this BRICS foreign ministers meeting took place, in which the Indian foreign minister was not present. The Indian side was represented by officials. But the BRICS foreign ministers' declaration was pretty strong, in which they talked about the offensive by the Israeli military. They talked about the situation in Gaza, and they were very strong in the criticism of the Israeli actions, which was a very rare and unusual rebuke by India, because India's stance has been, supportive of Israel in the initial days.
And Shubhajit, coming back to the India GCC meeting, there is a joint action plan 2024-2028 that has been adopted. Can you tell us what is that about?
So after the meeting of the India GCC, foreign ministers, they adopted this joint action plan for about 4 years, in which they agreed to cooperate on a variety of areas. So that was sort of the reason this particular joint action plan was adopted, especially in the wake of, the strategic, the importance of the region. About 9 million Indians live and work there. India depends on GCC for much of its energy security needs. And in recent years, India has developed ties with them strategically and in terms of connectivity as well. So from all this perspective, India signed this joint action plan to improve the relations with the Gulf Cooperation Council countries.
And next we talk about the infectious disease Mpox, which has been declared a public health emergency of international concern by the World Health Organization. Now, this is actually the second time that the disease has got this designation in the past 2 years. While it has been reported in over 116 countries since 2022, the disease's biggest surge at the moment is being reported in the Democratic Republic of Congo, where 650 people have died so far. In this segment, my colleague Shashank Bhargav speaks to Indian Express's Anonna Dutt, who talks about Mpox and how it impacts the body.
So, Mpox, which was previously referred to as Monkeypox, is a viral infection, usually self-limiting, but it can lead to death in certain cases. The most common symptoms of Mpox is, are fever, headache, muscle ache, back pain, swollen lymph nodes, but most importantly, these swollen pox-like rashes on the skin, which is the most discerning feature of this infection.
And Anonna, what is the reason that the WHO decided to declare it a global health emergency?
So if you remember, even during COVID in 2022, WHO had declared Mpox, then known as monkeypox, of course, as the public health emergency of international concern. That's because at that time it had started spreading outside of areas where it was usually found in. And now, even after 2 years of that, why the WHO has gone back to that designation is because of this new type of Mpox that is spreading, clade 1b. So infections with this particular type of Mpox are more transmissible, and it's also more virulent. So it's causing more severe disease and deaths, and it's spreading faster, which is the reason WHO has designated it as a public health emergency. Also, the thing with this is clade 1 infections weren't known to be sexually transmissible. It would usually transmit from the pus from the rashes or being in close contact with the infected person or infected animals. But in the current outbreak, a lot of it is happening because of sexual transmission.
And who are the people most at risk for this disease?
So while the risk is, everybody is at equal risk. Of course, children with the weaker immune system are more likely to get more severe disease and die from it. But right now, the current outbreak is very concentrated amongst, sexual networks. So it is happening a lot in men who have sex with men.
Right. And the current outbreak, as we mentioned before, is centered around the Democratic Republic of Congo and the countries around it. But Anonna, tell us, are there any vaccinations available for this?
Yes, there are a couple of vaccines that have been approved across the world right now, and even the WHO's, the body that recommends vaccines for public health measures, they have also recommended these vaccines. However, not many countries have access to these vaccines. And secondly, for a country like India, we do not really need the vaccines right now. Those are needed in case there is a large local outbreak or, if you think that there is a possibility of a large local outbreak. The vaccinations are actually right now needed in countries where most of the cases are coming from.
Right. So in that sense, how concerned are Indian authorities at the moment? How big of a risk is it for India?
So there was a meeting of the national experts a few days back, and depending on the information provided by the WHO and their own assessment, they think that the risk of a local and sustained outbreak in India is quite low. Yes, there could be some cases that get imported, during travel. So for that, they have already started screening at airports. The airport health units have been sensitized. So have the seaports and, ground crossings. And everybody at these health units have been asked to screen for Mpox. But it doesn't seem very likely right now that there could be a local outbreak.
And in the end, we talk about Pakistan violating the ceasefire agreement on the line of control. Yesterday, a border security force personnel was injured when Pakistani troops opened fire on Indian positions along the border, officials told news agency PTI. The incident occurred at around 2:35 a.m. in the Akhnoor area, which was responded to by the BSF. One BSF personnel sustained injuries in the Pakistani firing, and now troops are on high alert, the BSF spokesperson added. While the Pakistani casualties remain unclear, the injured BSF soldier is currently being treated. Back in February 2021, India and Pakistan had reaffirmed their ceasefire agreement, following which these incidents had become rare. However, last year, a BSF Jawan was killed in a similar attack by Pakistani Rangers in the Ramgarh sector. This was the first fatality in over 3 years. This comes at a time when Jammu and Kashmir has been gearing up for assembly elections, its first in 10 years. While the first phase of the elections is on 18th September, the second phase is on 25th September, followed by the third one on 1st October. The army has been working on strengthening its counter-infiltration grid by redeploying its troops along the LOC fence in temporary operating bases or TOBs in the higher reaches as well as in forests and mountains where intense search operations would be carried out, officials aware of the plans had told the Indian Express. This is aimed at destabilizing terrorists by disrupting their hideouts and drawing them into contact, as well as denying them access to population centers. Around 300 additional companies of Central Armed Paramilitary Forces have been deployed for the first phase of the elections, and this would be stationed in towns and hinterlands for the protection of booths, candidates, and the voting population. The troops have been deployed along the LOC fence, and the permanent operating bases round the year, and operations are carried out regularly. However, the intensity of the operations will be raised, and a large number of TOBs will be established in specific vulnerable areas as part of enhanced security measures during the polls. As part of the preparations, route opening parties will also step up operations, and more checkposts, including mobile vehicle ones, will come up at population centers and roads. Drones will be deployed for increased surveillance and area domination. Surveillance has been stepped up as regards activities of known overground workers. You were listening to 3 Things by the Indian Express. Today's show was edited and mixed by Suresh Pawar and produced by Shashank Bhargav and me, Niharika Nanda. If you like the show, then do subscribe to us wherever you get your podcasts. You can also recommend the show to someone you think will like it. Share it with a friend or someone in your family. It's the best way for people to get to know about us. You can also tweet us at Express Audio and write to us at podcasts@indianexpress.com.